The words hung in the air of Providence Municipal Court, flat and careless. "You can't touch me." They weren't shouted. They weren't whispered. They were stated as simple fact, delivered with the casual certainty of someone who had never been told no, and meant it. Sloan Harwood stood at the defendant's table with her arms crossed, chin elevated, her expression registering something between boredom and mild irritation. She looked at Judge Frank Caprio the way one might glance at a service worker who had made an inconsequential mistake. Behind her sat Daniel Crest, her attorney, whose 800 per hour rate made him the preferred counsel for Rhode Island's most privileged families. Judge Caprio sat motionless behind the bench, reading glasses perched on his nose, eyes fixed on the file before him. When he finally spoke, he didn't look up. "Miss Harwood, this is a courtroom. We will proceed with respect." She exhaled through her nose, a sound caught between a laugh and a sigh. "I'm just saying. My father is Victor Harwood. He funds half the city. So maybe we skip the theatrics and I pay whatever fine this is." Judge Caprio turned a page slowly, deliberately. His voice remained even, almost soft. "We don't skip anything here." Sloan shifted her weight impatiently. "Fine. Then let's get this over with." The clock on the wall read 10:30 a.m. What unfolded over the next hour would become a masterclass in how the justice system responds when privilege assumes it has purchased immunity from consequences. Miss Reyes, the court clerk, stood and read from the docket with practiced formality. "Case number 2025-TR-9927, State versus Sloan Harwood. Charges include reckless driving, intimidation of a public officer, destruction of a citation, and failure to appear." Daniel Crest rose smoothly, his movements polished by decades of courtroom experience. "Your Honor, we're prepared to settle the base fine today and close this matter efficiently." Judge Caprio's eyes lifted from the file, moving from Crest to Sloan, then back to the documents before him. "Sit down, counselor." Crest hesitated, just a fraction of a second, then complied. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly. "Miss Harwood, you were issued a citation 14 months ago for a minor traffic violation. Do you remember what I told you then?" Sloan shrugged with theatrical indifference. "Not really." Miss Reyes slid a document across to the bench. Judge Caprio read aloud, his voice measured. "Warning note, filed November 2024. This court gives everyone a fair chance. The next time you're here, that chance has been used." Your signature is at the bottom. He looked up. "There's also this notation. I understand that courtesy is not unlimited. Next violation will be reviewed in full context. Signed, S.H." Sloan glanced at her lawyer dismissively. "Okay. So what? I forgot." "You didn't forget," Judge Caprio said quietly. "You didn't think it mattered." She rolled her eyes. "Look, I was late to a meeting. I was going maybe 10 over. It's not like I hurt anyone." "We'll get to that," Caprio said, his tone holding the weight of what was coming. Miss Reyes cleared her throat. "Your Honor, Officer Donnelly is present, as is Mr. Harold Simmons, the complainant." Sloan muttered under her breath, just loud enough to carry across the quiet courtroom. "This is insane." Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. "What did you say?" She looked up, defiance sharpening her features. "I said this is insane. I'm sitting here because some cop had a bad day and decided to make an example out of me." "No," Caprio replied, his voice still calm, but carrying unmistakable authority. "You're sitting here because you broke the law, and because you tried to make it disappear." Crest stood again. "Your Honor, my client denies—" "Counselor." The single word, spoken without volume but with absolute finality, stopped Crest mid-sentence. "Sit." He sat. Sloan tilted her head with affected confidence. "I have nothing to hide." Miss Reyes pulled up a document on the courtroom monitor. "Exhibit C. Text message sent by Miss Harwood to a friend 2 hours after the citation was issued. The screen illuminated with damning clarity. Text message, November 8th, 2024, 3:47 p.m. Got pulled over LOL. These people should be grateful my dad funds half this city. One call, and it's gone. The courtroom fell into complete silence. Several people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Sloane's face flushed, but she recovered quickly, her voice defensive. That was a joke. Judge Caprio's response was measured. Was it? She said nothing. Officer Donnelly, Judge Caprio said, please tell us what happened that day. Officer Mia Donnelly stepped forward with the composed demeanor of someone who had testified countless times. Mid-30s, professional bearing, no visible emotion crossing her features. She placed a small notebook on the witness stand, but didn't open it. November 8th, 2024. I was parked near the corner of Broad and Elmwood, monitoring traffic in a school zone. At approximately 2:14 p.m., I observed a black Range Rover traveling at 53 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. I initiated a traffic stop. Judge Caprio nodded. Continue. The vehicle pulled into a pharmacy parking lot. I approached and requested license and registration. The defendant provided her license but refused to provide registration. She told me, Donnelly glanced briefly at her notes, that I should know who she is, and that this was a waste of her time. I was polite, Sloan interrupted. Officer Donnelly didn't acknowledge the interruption. I explained that speed enforcement near schools is non-negotiable. She interrupted me multiple times and stated, my father owns half the buildings on this street. You work for him whether you know it or not. That's not, Sloan began. Judge Caprio raised his hand. The interruption ceased immediately. Officer Donnelly continued. I issued the citation. She took it, tore it in half, and threw it on the ground. Then she returned to her vehicle and left the scene. Judge Caprio removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture suggesting both weariness and disappointment. Miss Harwood, did you tear the citation? She hesitated. It was just paper. It's an official document. You tore it and left. That constitutes destruction of government property and failure to comply. He paused. But there's more, isn't there, officer? Donnelly nodded. Yes, Your Honor. As the defendant was exiting the parking lot, an elderly man was crossing toward the pharmacy entrance. She accelerated rapidly and passed within approximately 2 feet of him. He had to step backward to avoid contact. I documented that as a reckless operation with disregard for pedestrian safety. Do we have the man's name? Harold Simmons. He's present in the courtroom today. Judge Caprio looked toward the gallery. Mr. Simmons, please come forward. An older man rose slowly from his seat, 78 years old, thin frame, wearing a brown jacket with a veteran's pin affixed to the lapel. He walked carefully to the witness stand, leaning slightly on a cane. Judge Caprio's voice gentled. Mr. Simmons, can you tell us what you remember from that day? Harold Simmons's voice was soft but steady, carrying the weight of lived experience. I was getting out of my car. I have arthritis in my knee, so I use this cane. I was walking toward the pharmacy door when I heard an engine rev loudly. I looked up and saw a large black SUV coming at me fast. I had to jump back, nearly fell. Did the driver stop? No, sir. She looked right at me and kept going. Did she say anything? Harold hesitated, his discomfort visible. It's okay, Judge Caprio said gently. She yelled out the window, called me slow, told me to get out of the way. Sloan leaned toward her attorney and whispered urgently. Crest shook his head in response, his expression suggesting this was going worse than he'd anticipated. Judge Caprio thanked Harold and asked him to remain nearby. The older man nodded and returned to his seat with careful steps. Miss Harwood, Caprio said, turning his attention back to the defendant. Do you remember Mr. Simmons? I remember someone stepping into the lot while I was leaving. I didn't almost hit him. That's an exaggeration. He had to jump back. He was moving slowly. The atmosphere in the courtroom tightened perceptibly. Even Daniel Crest appeared uncomfortable. Judge Caprio turned to Miss Reyes. What else is in the file? She pulled up another document on the monitor. Call log, Your Honor. 3 calls were placed to the clerk's office in the week following the citation. 2 from a number registered to Harwood Property Group. 1 from a law office representing Victor Harwood. What did they request? Miss Reyes read from the screen, her voice neutral. The first call requested case status. The second call inquired whether the matter could be handled quietly due to the family's civic stature. The third call offered to expedite payment in exchange for reducing the charges to a parking violation. Judge Caprio's expression remained unchanged, but the silence that followed carried substantial weight. And then there's this, Miss Reyes continued, pulling up an email. Email excerpt, November 15, 2024. From Harwood PR Counsel to Providence Municipal Court Administration Subject, Case 2025 TR 9927, Courtesy Request. We respectfully request quiet resolution given the Harwood family's long-standing civic contributions. A favorable outcome would be mutually beneficial. Judge Caprio looked directly at Sloan. Did you know about these calls? She shifted uncomfortably. My father was trying to help. By making it disappear? By handling it. That's what people do. Not in my courtroom. Sloan's jaw tightened, her frustration breaking through. You're acting like I committed some serious crime. I was speeding. Big deal. Everyone speeds. Judge Caprio's voice remained calm, but every word landed with precision. You endangered a 78-year-old veteran. You disrespected an officer performing her duty. You destroyed a legal document. And then you attempted to use money and influence to erase accountability. He paused. That's not everyone. That's you. She straightened, her face flushing with anger. My father signs your checks. The room went utterly still. Judge Caprio stared at her. 5 seconds passed. 7, 10, 12. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. Then he spoke, his voice quiet, but carrying throughout the courtroom. Your father doesn't sign anything that comes into this courtroom, but I'll tell you what he did sign. He nodded to Miss Reyes, who pulled up another file. Officer Donnelly, Judge Caprio said, his tone shifting slightly. You lost your home 2 years ago. Is that correct? Officer Donnelly's professional composure flickered for just a moment. Yes, Your Honor. The foreclosure was handled by Harwood Capital Recovery, Victor Harwood's firm. Correct? Sloan's face went pale. I didn't ask you to confirm anything, officer, Caprio continued. I'm simply stating a fact. Miss Harwood's father's company took your home, and she just stood here and told you that you work for him. Sloan opened her mouth, then closed it without speaking. Officer Donnelly said nothing, but her hands, resting on the witness stand, had gone white at the knuckles. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair. Miss Harwood, you said I can't touch you. You're wrong. The law touches everyone. It has to, or it means nothing. Miss Reyes displayed a timeline on the monitor. November 8, 2024, 2:14 p.m. Traffic violation and citation issued 3:47 p.m. Text message sent, 1 call, and it's gone. November 10th, 2024, 10:22 a.m. Call from Harwood Property Group to clerk's office. November 12th, 2024, 2:45 p.m. Call from Harwood, legal to court. Administration. November 15th, 2024, 4:10 p.m. Email. Sent offering settlement terms. November 16th, 2024, 9:03 a.m. Bank transfer attempt. Flagged and rejected. Judge Caprio picked up his pen and wrote notes on the file. Then he looked up, his expression grave. Here's what I find. You committed reckless driving in a school zone, a place where children are present. You intimidated a public officer performing her lawful duties. You destroyed government property. You failed to appear for your original court date. And after all that, you attempted to use your family's wealth and position to avoid consequences. Sloane's voice came out smaller now, the bravado cracking. What does that mean? It means you're guilty on all charges. Crest stood quickly. Your Honor, we'd like to request— Sit down, he sat. Judge Caprio continued, his voice steady and measured. The base fine for these violations is $1,150, but I'm not interested in your money. I'm interested in whether you understand what you did wrong. I do, Sloan said quickly. Do you? Do you understand that you nearly injured someone? That you disrespected an officer doing her job? That you tried to purchase immunity because you thought your name made you untouchable? Sloan looked down at her hands. I didn't think. That's the problem, Caprio interrupted. You didn't think. You assumed. You assumed the rules that govern everyone else didn't apply to you. He set his pen down deliberately. So here's what's going to happen. The fine remains, but half will be suspended pending your completion of what I'm calling a restorative accountability path. What does that mean? Crest asked cautiously. It means Miss Harwood is going to write formal apology letters to Officer Donnelly and Mr. Simmons. Real apologies that acknowledge harm, not feelings. She's going to complete 150 hours of community service, assisting elderly mobility groups, working with people exactly like Mr. Simmons. She's going to produce 2 public service announcements explaining that wealth does not equal authority. She's going to take a judicial ethics course and submit a 900-word essay on equal treatment under the law. Sloane's mouth opened in disbelief. You can't be serious. I am completely serious. And one more thing. Judge Caprio turned to Miss Reyes. This court is establishing an influence firewall protocol, effective immediately. Any future attempt to contact court staff regarding pending cases must be logged and disclosed publicly. Any offer of settlement outside normal channels triggers mandatory escalation review. This begins today. He turned back to Sloan. Miss Harwood, if you complete this program within 10 weeks, I'll reduce the fine by half and close the case. If you don't, the full fine applies, and you'll face additional penalties for non-compliance. Do you understand? She nodded, barely. I need to hear you say it. I understand. Good. We'll reconvene in 10 weeks. Court adjourned. The gavel came down softly, but its echo seemed to fill the entire room. The first 2 weeks were a disaster. Sloan submitted her first apology letter to Officer Donnelly through the court system. Miss Reyes rejected it within an hour. It was 3 sentences long and included the phrase, "if you felt disrespected." The second draft wasn't much better. Miss Reyes sent it back with a note. An apology acknowledges harm, not feelings. The third version took Sloan 4 hours to write. She rewrote it 6 times, struggling to articulate something she'd never been forced to confront: that her actions had real consequences for real people. When Miss Reyes finally approved it, Sloan felt something unexpected: relief mixed with shame. The service hours proved even more challenging. She reported to the East Providence Senior Mobility Center on a Tuesday morning, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer wardrobe. The coordinator, a woman named Mrs. Pacheco, handed her a clipboard and a name tag. You'll be assisting with transportation pickups and walking support. Stay close to your assigned senior. Listen more than you talk. Sloan was paired with a man named Gene, 81 years old, who moved with a walker and made self-deprecating jokes about his knees. The first day, she barely spoke, keeping her head down and simply performing the required tasks. The second day, Gene asked her why she was there. She lied and said it was for a school project. Must be some school, Gene said with a knowing smile. By week 4, she'd stopped lying. Gene introduced her to other veterans at the center. One Thursday afternoon, Sloan walked into the common area and froze. Sitting near the window with a book was Harold Simmons. He looked smaller than she remembered, more fragile. He sat peacefully reading, sunlight filtering through the window beside him. Sloan approached slowly, her heart pounding. "Mr. Simmons," he looked up. Recognition came gradually, and his expression shifted, not to anger, but to cautious awareness. "Yes. I'm Sloan Harwood. I'm the one who almost hit you in the parking lot." Harold set his book down carefully. "I'm sorry," she said, the words coming out unsteady. "I'm really sorry. I wasn't paying attention and I didn't stop and I said something terrible to you. I've been thinking about it for weeks and I needed to say it in person." Harold studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Sit down." She sat. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Judge Caprio gave me a choice. Pay a fine and walk away, or do this and learn something." She paused. "And I'm learning." Harold smiled faintly. "That's good. Most people don't." They talked for 20 minutes. He told her about his military service, about his wife who had passed 3 years earlier, about the pharmacy trips that had become part of his weekly routine, small moments that gave structure to his days. Sloan listened. Really listened. Not waiting for her turn to speak, not planning her response, but genuinely hearing another person's story. When she left that day, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. By week 8, she'd completed 130 service hours. The essay proved more difficult than she'd anticipated. She rewrote the introduction 4 times, struggling to articulate something she'd never been required to think about before. Why the law must apply to everyone equally, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you have the money and connections to make problems disappear. She submitted it on a Sunday night, 3 days before the deadline. Miss Reyes called the next morning. "It's approved." Sloan exhaled deeply. "Thank you." "One more thing," Miss Reyes said. "Officer Donnelly left a note for you." "What does it say?" She said, "You showed up. That counts for something." The follow-up hearing was scheduled for late March. Sloan walked into the same courtroom, but everything felt different. This time, she didn't cross her arms or adopt a defensive posture. She stood straight, hands at her sides, and waited respectfully. Judge Caprio entered and took his seat. Miss Reyes confirmed that all requirements had been met. Letters delivered and accepted, hours completed, PSAs recorded and aired, essay submitted and approved. "Miss Harwood," Judge Caprio said, "you've completed the program. How do you feel?" She thought carefully before answering. "Tired, but better." "Why better?" "Because I understand now. What I did wasn't just breaking a rule. It was telling people they didn't matter." She paused. "And they do." Judge Caprio nodded slowly, something resembling approval crossing his features. "The court accepts your completion. The fine is reduced as promised. Your record will reflect successful rehabilitation." He paused, leaning forward slightly. "I want you to remember something. The people you met over these 10 weeks, Jean, Mr. Simmons, Officer Donnelly, they didn't have a choice about how your actions affected them. You did. You chose badly. But then you chose to fix it. That second choice is what defines character." Sloan's throat tightened. "Thank you, Your Honor." "You're welcome." Case closed. The gavel came down with finality. Sloan walked out of the courtroom and saw Harold Simmons standing near the door, waiting. He nodded at her. She nodded back, a gesture of mutual respect that needed no words. Outside, the March air was cold but clear. Sloan pulled her coat tighter and started walking, no longer the person who had stood in that courtroom 10 weeks earlier. Behind her, the city continued its rhythm. Officers writing tickets, clerks filing paperwork, judges hearing cases. The system turned forward, indifferent to names and bank accounts, exactly as it was designed to do. 3 months later, Officer Donnelly received a letter at her station. No return address, just a Providence postmark. Inside was a single sentence in careful handwriting. "Thank you for not giving up on me." She pinned it to the board above her desk, where it remained. And in Providence Municipal Court, Judge Frank Caprio opened the next file, adjusted his reading glasses, and said the same thing he always said. Let's proceed. This story is a dramatization created for storytelling and educational purposes. All characters, events, and institutions depicted are fictional. This content is not legal advice and should not be interpreted as such.